the new update has meant that radios have a 60-second bleed out timer. And all across the squad community, people are mourning the combat engineers. I'm going to just talk a bit about my thoughts on the class and whether I feel it's actually affected, or it might just be something that we have to slightly change in the way we play it. So I'm going to cover my experiences with the combat engineer so far and why I think only certain types of players will play it. I'm going to suggest some strategies that engineers could probably incorporate into the gameplay, because at its core it's not a huge change, and the principles that have kind of made the class what it is are still very much there. Always been quite vocal in saying that it wants to monitor this, and I think only time will really tell when the meta kind of changes for combat engineers. On average, and from experience, a combat engineer is not picked by a non-experienced player, because there's a lack of optics, there's low mags, and generally inferior weapons. Combat engineers are still a very versatile class, so they support building, they can help vehicle repairs, they can jump in a vehicle, they can go mine around the map and deny the enemy logistics, they can stay with the squad leader and build hubs, or get into a helicopter, get dropped off behind enemy lines and hunt habs. The squad devs are trying to move away from that, and I can see why. I think there's an issue of one person having the power to completely destroy FOBs single-handedly. And I think the community right now is in two camps. So one side is saying, if you're not able to defend a radio very well, you deserve to lose it, basically. The habs that are sitting halfway across the map and have been forgotten about because the game has developed to another side of the map are still fair game for combat engineers, and I don't think they, even solo, will have a problem taking them down because nobody's spawning in on them. On the flip side, really established habs will be a lot harder to take down because of the sheer amount of people that are against them. What could have happened in this situation is we could have actually specifically aimed a change at the class itself, which I think would have fundamentally taken away that freedom. So I think to some extent there has been a bit of a compromise made on keeping its combat effectiveness there. There will be a few strategies that combat engineers might want to be using more often. So buddying up with one or two people to roam around maps and destroy habs. The radios achieve bleed out state after 1 C4 and 6 shovels. So as a combat engineer, I'm actually looking forward to playing the class in a more creative way, using that time to set up and wait for an enemy coming back, and to some extent in well-defended areas waiting for a flood of enemies to come back like it's some kind of horde mode. And whether that's holding down a room, use your razor wire, use your sandbags to lock the area down a little bit, especially if the fob is in a doorway or, up a flight of stairs. If it's out in the open, again, you can easily counter that by, even alone, right, proning in a bush, waiting for people to, start running towards the fob. From general experience, if I'm on a team and the fob is going down, there's a lot of comms, there's a lot of confusion, and people are prioritizing just getting to the radio rather than taking it slow and methodically to get back to it. If you've put down the C4, another thing to consider is that when it explodes, the hab becomes disabled. So the only people you will be defending against are people that have already been in the area and are probably running back by now. But that will still eat about 20-30 seconds before anybody comes and poses a threat. If you're established and if you're patient, you can still wait out that bleed out timer alone. But again, I think kind of operating as a fire team, 2 or 3 people, 2 perhaps to overrun it, you to find the radio, or all 3 of you just holding the radio area would still pose quite a big threat to an enemy team. One thing that isn't currently clear is whether teams will just start spamming habs, because the opportunity cost of actually destroying a fob now being 10 tickets, and with the risk of you losing a lot of people attacking these fobs really doesn't warrant, let's say, 10 men that have attempted to take it down. The commander abilities don't have the effect of destroying a fob now because it will enter bleed out time. So defending teams will have that extra, get out of jail free card to try and rescue it and dig it back up again. So here's some footage of an airstrike hitting a radio, which is then followed by this kind of king of the hill scrap between people trying to dig up the radio, people then killing the people saving the radio, trying to dig it down again. And I think this has the unintended consequence of maybe, just maybe, having squads prioritize fighting off habs. While this scrap is going on, behind them, there's an objective that's just not being contested or fought over. So again, it'll take some player education for sure. On the other hand, there's an elephant in the room that nobody seems to be talking about. The way you destroy a fob effectively is by overrunning the hab. And in most cases, if you are fighting against a coordinated squad that's pushing up together, doesn't even have to be a full 9-man squad. It could be 3 to 4 players that overrun the hab, disable it, secure the area. Then effectively that bleed out timer becomes redundant anyway because there's no enemy players that are alive. If you are a combat engineer and you're able to orbit around your squad, sit on the flanks of them, spot habs while having the full support of a 3-man team or upwards, you can still lone wolf, get into areas, find radios, disable it, and then have people following you to kind of back you up. So that's completely the same strategy that was used. You just need to make more of an effort to coordinate and kind of set up an ambush on an enemy fob. The other kind of effect on general gameplay is that if you have 2 established habs with more chance of them surviving, you might see teams developing more and more alternative, like secondary or backup hubs, and 60 seconds is ample time for a team to run back and try and dig it up again. Then it might make sense for combat engineers to start focusing on those backup, like secondary hubs. And I don't think for a second that when people play engineer, they will really be affected by it. If anything, if someone is happy to walk like 3 miles in game just to get to a hab, die and then try again, then I think they'll be very happy to try and go at a challenge of holding down radio for 60 seconds after making that journey, because it'll make that even more satisfying for them. So to be honest, it's a really good step in the right direction. It'll for sure encourage more people to buddy up and kind of attack and ambush. Again, if it's adding this extra layer where I need to make sure that somebody's with me, then obviously that makes the class even stronger than it actually is. It just will require a bit more planning, a bit more patience, and perhaps just concentrating on other roles that the combat engineer has, which is area denial, setting down mines, disrupting logistics, helping squad leaders, and on top of all that, destroying hubs, which arguably it still can do very effectively.